Music has an amazing effect. There's a lot of physiologic effects associated with music, and it does make a difference what kind of music it is too. Certain kinds of music have negative effects physiologically on the body, and certain kinds of music have good effects on the body. That kind of music is a good effect, and it has words that have a good effect along with it as well. And so we want to do everything in order to help out our mood, help out our thinking, and so on, especially after what we learned yesterday. Now, some of you are here for the first time. You weren't here yesterday, and so you missed a lot of what you missed everything what we were talking about yesterday, but you can catch up on it because it's in the book, right? And also, we're videoing the series as well, so eventually we'll have that up online so that we can get back and you can review what you missed. We will, a little bit later in the series, have more of that available for you and the information about it. Now, just as a brief recap, yesterday we were looking at health from the standpoint of a tree. And a tree has, of course, fruit, it has leaves, it has branches, it has a trunk, and it has roots, and it's planted in the soil. And when that tree, the analogy of the tree relates to us and health, well, the fruit and the leaves are like symptoms. They're the obvious things: pain, itching, coughing, and so on and so forth. But the symptoms don't cause themselves. They're supported by the branches, and the branches represent our behaviors or our actions, eating and drinking and breathing and so on and so forth. But the reason that we eat or drink or breathe is because the branches have to be attached to something. It's the trunk, and the trunk represents our needs. We need oxygen and water and sunshine and so on and so forth. And so therefore we must breathe and eat and drink in order to supply those things that we need. But when you get below the ground, we have the roots, and the roots represent our beliefs. What you believe influences how you behave. But you don't necessarily know what an individual believes until you dig. You start asking, investigating, and so on. And then you find out what they believe, and it manifests itself in how they behave. So what you believe is really important, because then that determines how you're going to act or you're going to behave. But ultimately, if you have a tree that has bad fruit or bad leaves, the problem is not the tree necessarily itself, it's the soil, the sources that we have. And so if we have our roots planted in the wrong sources, we're going to have problems. But if it's planted in the right sources with what we need, then that's going to supply what we need, as long as the beliefs and the behaviors match with the needs. And then you can have healthy fruit and healthy leaves. And we also highlighted the fact that one of the needs that you and I as human beings have is, what was it? Love. That's right. We need love. And so love functions like that too. There's got to be a source. There's an action associated with love, which we identified as thinking. It's thoughts, it's thinking that brings in the love that we need. And then your beliefs associated with love is going to determine how you think about it, which is going to impact how you bring it in and what source you plant yourself in, right? We also looked at the cells and how the cells function. We looked at law and how when we deviate from law, like the law of body temperature or the law of blood sugar or whatever laws we can think of in our body, that as we deviate from that law, we end up with symptoms, disease, and eventually death. And usually when you deviate from a law, there is some discomfort associated with it, to let you know that you're off the road and you need to get back on. And that's a good thing. Pain is actually not a bad thing. Pain is a good thing. The ability to sense pain is a good thing. You find out that it's not so bad when somebody loses their sense of pain, like somebody with leprosy. right? The bacterial infection ends up then damaging the nerves. You don't have pain sensation anymore, and without the sensation of pain, you do things that damage yourself, and you don't even know that you're damaging yourself. Which is why many individuals with leprosy, if it's not treated, they end up losing fingers, losing toes, getting down to nubs on their hands, and so on and so forth. Why? Because they continue to injure themselves, but not even know that they're injuring themselves. And so pain is actually a good thing to let you know something's wrong so that you can do something about it, right? Disease, too, is a good thing because it's a manifestation that there's something wrong and we need to do something about it. But the doing something about it is not plucking off the fruit and the leaves. It's not just taking care of the symptoms associated with it. It's finding the cause. What's the cause that's causing the thing? Because if you remove the cause, the effect has to start going away. Because there's this law of cause and effect. No effect creates itself. It always has a cause associated with it. And so if you can identify the cause and remove the cause, then the thing that's driving the effect must go away. Right? We looked at the cells and how the cells function and that they all need raw materials like oxygen and water and nutrients and so on and so forth, and that's brought to the cells through the bloodstream. We looked at the fact that every cell needs electricity, it needs power, energy in order for it to function, and that the spark that generates that comes through the nervous system, right? Comes through the nervous system, through the nerves to the different parts of the body in order to control the function of the different cells and tissues and organ systems and so on so that it functions the way that it should. And that the origin of the spark, where that comes from, has to do with thought, spiritual information that comes through the spirit to the cortex of the brain, is manifested in electrical activity in the brain, which you and I could measure with an EEG and so on and so forth, and then is transmitted down the nerves to the different parts of the body in order to control the function. That's a brief overview of what yesterday was about. And so now let's look at the causes of dysfunction. We're going to go on from there. You notice page 24. If you like looking at books while things are going along, you can. So causes of dysfunction. What are the different causes of dysfunction? Well, one of those is inheritance, right? We can have dysfunction from an inheritance standpoint. And inherited diseases are diseases that manifest in the individual as a result of changes in the genetic code of one's parents or grandparents or so on, right? That manifest regardless of the environment or lifestyle factors of the individual, right? They can have a perfect lifestyle, they can have a perfect environment, they're still going to manifest the disease because of the genetic change that happened in the parents, and it happens to be in a section of genes that must be coded for something that's vital, that's going on in the body. This includes conditions like Huntington's chorea. Maybe you haven't heard much about that, but anyways, it's an autosomal dominant condition where it causes a genetic mutation and an individual starts having kind of interesting movements in their, and then they start developing kind of a psychosis along with it and a lot of anger and so on and so forth, and the individual dies. Usually in their 50s, maybe in their 60s or so. Next generation, it manifests about 20 years sooner. And if it hits the third generation, then they usually die before they get to the age of childbearing. And then, so, and can you do anything about it? We can't cure it. You can do all the lifestyle factors that you want to. It's there. It's an inherited condition, and you really can't do anything about it. Cystic fibrosis, it's another one where there's a genetic mutation. There's an overproduction of salt in the sweat. That's one way that you can test it. It is doing a sweat test, a salt test of the skin. That also messes up the function of the lungs and the production of extra excretions or mucus and so on in the lungs, and individuals develop lung infections and typically die by the time they hit their 30s, although with some treatments nowadays it's lasting a little bit longer, maybe a decade or more longer. But you can't cure the condition because it's an inherited condition, and you can't, they're problematic because you can't remove the cause. Because the cause is backwards in time, right? The mutation happened in a prior generation. You can't travel back in time in order to fix it. And the manifestation is a change in DNA in every cell of the body. And you and I just don't have the capacity to go and fix that DNA change, that DNA problem in each cell of the body. Now, if we figured out how to do it and we were really good microsurgeons, and we could pull out a cell, fix the DNA, put it back, pull out a cell, fix the DNA, put it back, pull out a cell, fix the DNA, and put it back. And we could do that once every second. Well, it would take millions of years before we got through all of our cells. And of course, you would be long gone by then. So when it comes to inherited conditions, we can't fix that. Does that mean that God cannot fix that? No. He can still fix that, but you and I, we can't fix that, right? But that's different than saying that a condition is genetic, right? It's different than saying that a condition is genetic. Many diseases in one way or another are genetic because in order for you to manifest that disease, you must dysregulate or mutate genes that help with proper function, or you must express genes that lead to dysfunction. Right? So diseases pretty much always are genetic, but we're not inherited. And I just want to kind of highlight the difference between the two terms there. Another cause for dysfunction is environment. Right? The cells live within the context of certain environmental conditions. One of those is pressure. Pressure is a good thing when it's within a certain range. Right. Once you get outside of that range, then you can have problems associated with pressure. For example, let's say that you're going for a walk, and there's some beautiful sight up in the sky, and you're looking at it, and you're like, oh, that's so beautiful. And somebody's driving along, and they see that beautiful sight up in the sky, and they go, oh, that's so beautiful. And all of a sudden, their car, which was going at 50 miles an hour, meets you, which was going at 2 miles an hour. And all of a sudden, you go from 2 to 55 miles an hour, and maybe you join the sky for a little bit, and then bump, bump, scrape, scrape, and so on and so forth, right? Well, all of a sudden, you had too much pressure, right? And that too much pressure was too much for the cells, and so they're damaged, and you have dysfunction because of too much pressure. Now, the other side we don't experience very often, unless you're a young male who's playing with a vacuum cleaner. All right, so confession time. Have you ever played with a vacuum cleaner? You turn it on, not the beater bar, but, you pull it off and you have the, the hose end and so on and so forth, and you stick it on your hand and go, and you pull it off and and then you wonder what it'll do, and you put it in other places, and you go, and so on. Well, you get done doing that, and you got this nice round red spot. Well, what's the red spot? Well, it was too little pressure, and the blood vessels, the pressure inside the blood vessels, now with too little environmental pressure, now it was too much, and the little blood vessels, the capillaries burst. And then blood comes out of those little capillaries into the surrounding tissue, and you end up with that hickey, right, from the vacuum cleaner. You have damage, dysfunction associated with too little pressure. A number of years ago, we had a daredevil who did the highest free fall and then parachuting, right? I can't remember his name, and I don't remember how many years ago it was, but he went up in this balloon, way up into the stratosphere. And then he jumped out, and I don't know for how many miles that he just, he fell and free fell and so on and so forth, and then finally pulled a parachute, and it was the world's record highest jump and so on. Well, he had to be in a spacesuit. Why did he have to be in a spacesuit? Well, the environmental pressure, the atmospheric pressure that high is so little that body temperature, 98.6 degrees, blood would boil because the pressure's so low. And so if he jumped out, besides the fact that it's really cold that high, but if he jumped out, he would boil to death at body temperature because the pressure was too low. So we have a certain pressure that we must be in order for the cells to function. And when we go one side or the other, then there's dysfunction associated with it. It's true for temperature as well. I think all of us have had the experience of meeting something that was too hot, like a stovetop. And then you've got a burn and blistering and so on. And so there's dysfunction there because of too much heat, too much temperature. But you can have dysfunction because of too little temperature as well. You can freeze things, frostbite or so on, or you can do the old tongue on the flagpole thing and during wintertime and and then you rip off a surface of your tongue. Well, there's dysfunction there because of too little temperature. And then finally, radiation. I don't know, really. I've got to research it a little bit. I don't know if you can have too little radiation, although much of the heat exchange that we have with the environment is through radiant heat waves and so on. So it would probably, if we had too little radiation, it'd probably be too cold, and then we'd have damage from that standpoint. But too much radiation, definitely. Chernobyl, and different nuclear events that have happened. And in Russia, there were some homeless individuals that were keeping themselves warm. And they were doing so, not in front of a fire, but they had this thing they were around, and it was keeping them warm. And so they were warming themselves up around it. Well, then they started getting really sick, and they ended up going to hospital, finding out that they had all sorts of radiation. It was a nuclear warhead that had been left in some location, and they had they were there and they were warming themselves around it, and then I think all of them died, or nearly all of them died, because of the radiation exposure. Right? So too much radiation and possibly too little can cause dysfunction as well. So that can be a cause of dysfunction, and environmental causes can be localized, right? You can bang one finger and the other fingers are okay. You can burn one hand and the other hand is okay. Right? So you can have localized dysfunction with environmental stuff. Raw materials, that's another cause for dysfunction as well. It's one that we're very familiar with. We know that if you don't eat well, there can be problems associated with it. But it also includes things like toxins or the wrong raw materials, like Coca-Cola instead of water, fried foods instead of fruits, nitrogen instead of, breathing all of the nitrogen and not enough oxygen, and so on. All of those can be wrong raw materials. You can have an imbalance of proper raw materials. So salt, you need salt. You need it to live. No salt, you'll die. But too much salt, well, over years, we know that you can develop high blood pressure associated with too much salt intake and so on. And in fact, populations, certain populations around the world that have fairly low salt intake, individuals in their 70s have the same average blood pressure as teenagers. Blood pressures don't increase as they age in those populations because they're not exposed to excess salt throughout all of those years. And so it does have its impact, right? And raw materials, when we look at raw materials, what happens when you eat the food? All right, so it's digest, right? So you're going to get the big stuff, and you're going to break it down into the smaller stuff, and eventually small enough that you can get it into the bloodstream. When it gets into the bloodstream, let's say that you had a milkshake, right? And part of the milkshake is going to have a lot of sugar. Part of it's going to have a lot of fat. And there's really not much protein there. All right, so we're talking sugar and fat. All right, so once it gets broken down, that sugar and fat, and it gets into the bloodstream, which part of the bloodstream is going to have high fat and which part's going to have high sugar? Like, does the high fat go to the belly and the high sugar goes to the back? Or the high fat goes to the toes and the high sugar goes to the nose? How does it work? Yeah, it goes all over, that's right. So once it gets into the digestive tract, it circulates around, and as it circulates around, you have this principle called diffusion. Right? Diffusion. It actually goes along with the thermal law of thermodynamics of entropy, law of entropy. So things tend to go from higher concentration in order to lower concentration, and so it will evenly distribute itself out through the bloodstream. So you'll have the same, once you give it a couple circulations, you'll have the same fat content and the same sugar content in any part of the bloodstream, right? Because it diffuses. So if that's the case, then your manifestations from raw materials should be relatively generalized and not so localized, unless it's a particular nutrient that one particular organ uses to a high extent. So example like, not potassium, iodine. Iodine. You have an iodine deficiency? Well, where are you going to notice it first? You're going to first notice it with the thyroid and thyroid dysfunction, because the thyroid uses iodine much faster, and it needs more of it compared to other tissues. So if you end up with a deficiency in iodine, well, you're going to start with problems with the thyroid, but eventually it's going to cause generalized problems through the rest of the body. Cholesterol is not going to cause problems in one spot, another spot, if it's just up to the cholesterol, like we talked about yesterday, right? It's going to be generalized because the concentration of cholesterol is the same throughout the bloodstream. So if you start developing a plaque in one spot and a plaque in another spot, there has to be something else that's starting the plaque and the collection of cholesterol, not just the cholesterol itself. Right? The cholesterol itself can't be the initiating cause, but in order for a cholesterol plaque to develop, you have to have the cholesterol. Right? So if you decrease the cholesterol in your diet, well, then you can help out with the plaques, but it doesn't necessarily take care of the problem that started the accumulation of the cholesterol in the first place. Right? What's going on there? Well, we can have dysfunction because of energy. And what do I mean by energy? I mean that control of the cellular function that comes through the nervous system. Right? That control of cellular function that comes through the nervous system that we were kind of highlighting last time, that begins with that spiritual information or thought converted to electrical activity in the cortex of the brain, carried by the nerves to the various different parts of the body in order to regulate their function. Now, what functions in the body are regulated through the nervous system? All of them. That's right. Yeah. Your blood pressure? Well, guess where the blood pressure is regulated? There's a blood pressure section of the brain, right? There's a blood pressure section that monitors. You have stretch receptors in your carotid arteries, in your aorta, and so on. There's a few other places as well. Those are the main ones. And when those arteries start stretching, then those stretch receptors start getting triggered, and that sends a signal up through the brainstem, through the hypothalamus, and it registers that, oh, it's starting to get big. Blood pressure is starting to go up. Now we need a signal to send back in order to try to decrease, relax things, so that there's not so much pressure that's in there, right? And there's several mechanisms by which it does that. I don't mean to go into those mechanisms right now, but you have very complex mechanisms, and you can double your blood pressure in under 5 seconds. You can double your blood pressure in under 5 seconds, depending on what happens. Right? So you have a very scary, stressful event. Lion jumps out in front of you and says, "Roar," and you run away. Well, within 5 seconds, your blood pressure could go from 120 to 240, right? Just with a simple response like that. And of course, if it was a lion saying "roar," then we would be glad for that increase in blood pressure and blood flow to the muscles and away from the skin, and dilated pupils, and increased blood sugar content, and so on and so forth. All that goes along with the stress response. That's a good thing when the big kitty wants to eat you, right? And so again, that's manifested through the nervous system to all the different parts of the body. And the nervous system is very specific because you have one spot in the brain that is controlling or connected with one spot in the body, and so on and so forth. It's like the power lines. The power company knows exactly how much power you're using because there's a line going to your house, and it's not the same line that's going to somebody else's house. Right? And so they can measure that, and it's just like that in the body, that it's very specific. And so if you have problems from an energy standpoint, you can have localized dysfunction, very specific spots where it causes a problem. For example, have you ever heard of gout? Yeah. Well, gout or gouty arthritis, it is a condition that individuals have, which is typically, the usual belief is that it's related to too much uric acid, that chemical uric acid in the body. And you have it accumulate in a particular joint, typically. And when it accumulates and concentrates in that joint, then it forms a crystal. And that crystal begins to poke on the tissues that are around it, cause damage, and there's a lot of inflammation associated with it. And it's very painful, it's red, it's swollen, and if you've ever dealt with anybody that has gout, or if you yourself if you yourself have had gout, thank you, get my English right, living in the South too long, then you know how painful it is, you know how swollen and so on and everything that it is. Well, being in the emergency department, I've had a number of patients that have come in and it's late at night and they're just in pain and they want relief for that, and you take their shoes off and lo and behold, whoa, that foot, wow. And it's the most common location is the first metatarsal phalangeal joint, so the base of your big toe. Right? That's the most common joint to develop gout. And when it's there, it's called podagra. Well, it can be on either one and so on and so forth, but usually that one right there. It can be knees, it can be other locations too, but again, it's most likely there. Well, I've had individuals that have come in and both of their feet are red and swollen. I've had some that have come in and the right side is, and I've had some come in and the left side is. Right? So when we look at these causes, inheritance, environment, raw materials, energy, well, which ones are possible causes? Let's think through it and go, what's the possible cause for dysfunction for gout? Is it inheritance? No, it can't be, right? Because inheritance came from a prior generation, it manifests regardless of what you do about it, and you can't get rid of it, right? Now, you can decrease the manifestations, but you can't get rid of the condition at all. But we know with gout, you can, right? And you can treat it, and so it's not an inherited issue. What about environment? Maybe, that's right. Yeah, it might be. So we'll keep that one on the list because environment can be localized. It can be in one spot or the other spot. So if you've got it in right foot but not the left foot, well, it could be an environmental issue. We could explore that a little bit. What about raw materials? Could it be caused by uric acid? Well, let me ask you this. When somebody has gout and the doctor wants to confirm that they have gout, they're going to send them to the lab to check their blood levels to see how high their uric acid is. So let's say it's you, a doctor's written an order, you're going to go to the lab and they're going to check your blood levels for uric acid. And as you do so, you go to the lab technician says, okay, take off your shoes. Right? You're like, what's going on? He says, well, we got to draw blood from your toe, right? Is that the case? No. I've never seen a lab technician draw from the toes. Right? Where do they draw from? From the arm, right? They get it from the arm or the hand, right? So they're going to get it here from an easily accessible area, and then they're going to draw the blood. They're going to send it and check it and see what the uric acid level is. And then it comes back and it shows that your uric acid level is 12, right? Oh, it's high. Definitely high. Oh, it's got to be gout. But where did they get the blood from? From your arm. Where's the problem? In your foot. What's the concentration of uric acid in the blood going by the elbow, and the blood going by the wrist, and the blood going by the finger joints, and the blood going by every other joint in the body, including the one that has a problem? The same. It's the same, right? So can it be just the uric acid that's the cause for the gout? No, it can't. Just like cholesterol cannot be the cause for a cholesterol plaque development in that spot. It can't be the cause because the concentration is the same throughout. Now, it's a cofactor. It's definitely a cofactor because if you remove the uric acid, if you decrease uric acid levels, the manifestation goes away. So it's a cofactor for sure, but it's not the cause, right? Can't be. And we've got to learn to reason logically about these. And unfortunately, much of the medical community, we haven't been taught to reason from cause to effect. We've been taught to understand things the way that we have been taught to understand things, and we take it for verbatim pretty much, and then we run with it, and then that's what we teach our patients. But we haven't really been taught to think from cause to effect. It cannot be uric acid that's the cause, right? There's got to be something else that causes it to accumulate. So it could be environment, because environment could localize. You could bang that toe and then have some kind of response associated with it. But it also could be, number 4, it could be the energy. Why? Because you have a particular nerve ending or a set of nerve endings that goes to that joint that don't go to any other joint in the body. And so if there is dysfunction from, let's say it's the right toe, from the left cortex, and the electrical signal that's sent from there down to that location in the toe, then it could set up an inflammatory response, immune system responding to neurologic signals. We know that happens, right? That then leads to an accumulation of uric acid that was already in the bloodstream, going by, and crystallization and then development of gout. So we're really left with 2 options. We're left with environment or we're left with energy as far as the cause for the gout. And if somebody doesn't remember that they ran over the toe with the car, or they hit it with a hammer, or some kind of trauma, some people say, well, it's because it's so far from the heart. Well, yeah, but there's a joint farther from it that usually isn't affected. So it's not even that, right? And so it really, I think we're actually closer to number 4. And then let's look at this. How strong can this effect be? There was a set of studies that were done between 2000 and 2013. And the researchers are investigating, that's a cute little mouse, the researchers are investigating a chemical that could potentially be used as an anti-inflammatory medication. Pain medication, anti-inflammatory. And of course, if you develop the next Tylenol, woohoo, you are billionaires, because there's billions of dollars of Tylenol that's sold every year, right? So that's what they're looking into. Of course, Tylenol is not anti-inflammatory, it's anti-pain. But if you develop the next ibuprofen, right? So anyways, they're investigating that, but you have to do animal studies to make sure things are safe and so on. So they're using mice, and they're studying this chemical, and one of the tests that you have to do is you have to get this chemical and you have to inject it in the fluid space around the brain. Why? Because you have this thing called the blood-brain barrier, and the blood-brain barrier keeps stuff in the bloodstream and only lets a select amount of things into the brain space. And that's really important because very simple things like even amino acids from proteins. Proteins broken down, amino acids. Amino acids actually serve as neurotransmitters in the brain. And so if you ate a meal and you didn't have that blood-brain barrier and those amino acids increased in the bloodstream and in the brain, you could have seizures just because of eating a meal. All right, so blood-brain barrier is really important, but sometimes it doesn't work. And so they inject this around the the fluid space of the brain to see what happens if it gets across the blood-brain barrier and how does it affect the brain and how it functions. So they're doing this study, and what they find is that when they inject this stuff around the mice brain, the mice stop producing a prominent inflammatory molecule called tumor necrosis factor alpha, or TNF-alpha. TNF-alpha is one of the prime chemicals that's produced to initiate inflammatory responses. And it's not usually produced in the brain. So they're scratching their heads and going, what's going on? So over a few years of investigation, what they found was happening is this. When they injected the substance around the brain, it changed the signal that was sent by the brain down the vagus nerve to the spleen. In the spleen, that signal was received by T helper cells, part of the immune system. The T helper cells went and interacted with natural killer cells, other cells in the immune system, and the natural killer cells, which are prominent producers of tumor necrosis factor alpha, they stopped producing it. Oh, interesting. So by changing the chemical, it changed the signal, which then had a couple-step interaction in the immune system to turn off the production of tumor necrosis factor alpha. Oh, the investigators looked at it and they thought, I wonder if we can do it without the chemical. Can we change the electrical signal in the nerve and get the same result? And so after a few more years of investigation, they were able to identify the nerve fibers that would go to the spleen. They were able to use an electrical device to stimulate a correct electrical, I'm just going to say frequency, but I'm not sure it was actually related to frequency. But anyways, an electrical frequency that then mimicked what was being done by the chemical, and they were able to get the same result. Oh, that was really exciting because what? Now, maybe we can skip medications and their side effects, because anti-inflammatory pain medications, they eat up the gut. You can have gut bleeding and so on and so forth. I mean, it can be pretty severe. And upset stomach and other things like that. Maybe we can target. Like say, for instance, you've got inflammation in your knee. And you can target the nerve fibers that are going to that knee, and you can apply the little electrical device, and you can change the signal so that it stops the inflammatory response there in the knee without having all the side effects of the medication. Oh, wow. So this is a really big field of research and investigation now. But it highlights the fact that your immune system responds to your nervous system. Right? Now, how do you and I control those signals that go to the spleen and control the production of tumor necrosis factor alpha on a regular basis? Well, it's by our thoughts. I'm not talking just conscious thoughts. We have unconscious thoughts as well. Right? But it's our thoughts. It's that electrical activity in the brain that is then in communication and is causing that, the vast majority of it unconsciously. What about cancer? Oh, there's a lot of research going on here with cancer, and how does cancer relate to the nervous system? It's really, really interesting, because what we're finding, there was a great review article that came out at the end of 2018 that was looking at the current research that we have related to the nervous system and its impact upon cancer, its development, its progression, and its metastasis. And guess what? Every step along the way, there is interaction of the nervous system and release of neurohormones, neurotransmitters, neuropeptides that assist the cancer in its initiation, that assist in its transformation, that assist in its ability to remove from its basement membrane and still live, that assist in its transformation from an epithelial like a cell, especially for skin type 1s or digestive ones, to a mesenchymal type of cell where it can move and not die, and blood flow to the tumors, and all of these steps along the way, there's nervous system input. And in fact, we've got research that shows that if you've got a tumor and you cut the nerve going to the tumor, it changes how the tumor behaves. Oh. So what are the implications of that? Well, the implications of that are that maybe, and it's stronger than maybe, but I'm just going to use maybe for now, maybe our thoughts and our attitudes have a lot more to do with our cancer and our susceptibility to cancer than we ever thought it did, right? Than we ever thought it did. Why is it that I treat individuals that are on that have been on a plant-based diet for 20 years and they're developing cancer? Right? You're like, oh, this shouldn't be. I've been a health reformer. I've been healthy. I've been doing, exercise, and I eat well, and all that kind of stuff. Now I've come down with cancer. Why do I have cancer? And so on and so forth. Well, what are you thinking? And when we talk, we investigate, we dig. We find out, oh, yeah, well, there's that issue that happened, and we're holding on to bitterness, or there's that, and we've got the guilt associated with it, or there's this other thing over there, and you can see it, and you can see the correlations. And it's really interesting when you get into a deep history with somebody and you go through not just, their health history, although you got to do that, and not just the family history, and you got to do that, but also their relationship history, Which relationships have there been in your life from very little until later, and who died when, and when was the divorce, and when did this one, and all of that kind of stuff. And when you do so and you put it all together in a timeline, you find that the vast majority of time before a major health trauma, development of cancer, autoimmune conditions, some other deterioration in health, there's some kind of relationship, emotional, spiritual, negative event that happened within a year or so before, or a few years. Depends on the manifestation. Again, sometimes it takes time for it to manifest where you know that it's there. But it's strong. You see it. I see it because now I'm looking for it. And when you're looking for it, then oh look, it's there. Right? It's there. Now, there's a fifth cause for dysfunction, and that is the enemy. What do I mean by that? Well, in the Bible, we read about Job. Job, it was one of the oldest books there, written by Moses, and Job is an old story of suffering. God knew suffering was a problem for human beings. We didn't know exactly how to approach it, and Job helps us with that idea of suffering and how to approach it and so on. But anyways, what happens with Job? Well, Job, was his thinking messed up? Well, no. God said that he was a righteous man, right, in all his ways. Was it an inheritance issue? No, it wasn't an inheritance issue. Was it an environmental issue? No. Was it a raw materials issue? No, it wasn't that. It was the enemy that asked for permission to get at him. And God gave him permission, and he ended up with boils from head to toe. And it was the enemy that caused the boils, right? And even in Jesus' time, we read about the boy, who the father brought the boy to Jesus for him to heal him, but Jesus was up on the mount, and so he got to the disciples first, and the disciples tried to cast out this demon, couldn't do it. And Jesus comes down, and everybody's like, oh, and Jesus asked the Father, what do you want? He says, well, if you can, I'd like you to heal my boy. Jesus says, if. you can believe. Right? And the father gets the idea, oh. But what was the symptoms of the boy? Do you remember? He would often be taken and he would shake and he would fall either into the fire or he would fall into the water or other things like that and so on and so forth. When you read it with a medical mind, you know what you see? Epilepsy, seizure disorder. That's right. Now, I'm not by no means do I want to say that every epilepsy or every seizure disorder is caused by the devil. Not at all. But in that particular case, how did Jesus heal him? He cast out the demon. That's right. So there are health challenges that individuals can have because the enemy, right? So we need to consider all of those if we're looking at a condition that an individual might have, and then what might be the cause that's going on, right? So all of those need to be considered when you're looking at your own health challenges and going, okay, well, what might be the cause, right? So let's go on from here. What do my needs tell me? Can you create that which you need? I got a couple of yeses, got some no's, right? All right, I got more no's than yeses. All right, so you need oxygen. Okay. You need water. No, all right, not that either. You need food. Can you create food? No. Even then, you can't. All right, so no, you cannot create what you need. Right? If you could, it wouldn't be a need. Right? The body can't create what it needs. The spirit can't create what it needs. Do we need love? Yeah, we do. We definitely do. Then can you create or produce love? No, you can't, right? Because if we could, it wouldn't be a need. I was actually in Serbia, and I was speaking to a group on this particular topic, and there was a woman there, and she was very insistent that, no, we can produce love. We can create it. I said, okay. So if that's the case, and that's the Spirit's need, you need love, then we can take you and we can put you in solitary confinement. We can feed you water, give you some sunshine, give you, the food and nutrient, all the physical needs that you have, toilet, bed, all that kind of stuff. You'll be fine. Why is solitary confinement such a powerful tool? It doesn't take away the need, it takes away the conduit, right? So you don't have access. At least the way that we're used to, right? So is that just our condition in this room, or is it everybody's condition? It's everybody's. It's generalized to humanity, right? It's all humanity. So can somebody breathe for me? No. All right. Can somebody else drink for me? No. I'm thirsty? Okay, so you take a drink and so I can feel better? No. Can somebody else eat for me? You're hungry, so I'm going to go get a meal for you and eat it myself? No. So it's only my actions, not somebody else's actions, that affect my health, right? Can your boss give you cancer? Isn't that the title of the presentation for tonight? Can your boss give you cancer? No. Because your boss can think anything that your boss wants to think. They can say anything that they want to say. But it's you who thinks what you think. And that's what affects your health, right? Another human being cannot be the source of that which I as a human being need because they need it too, right? So somebody else can't be the source of what I need because they need the very same things that I need as well. So can another person be my source of love? No. No, they can't, right? We can try. What happens when we try? Oh, yeah. So you have a neighbor. Neighbor comes over and they knock on the door and they want something. So, sugar or whatever. And then they come back and they knock again. And they want some eggs. Okay. And then they come back and they knock again. And they want some flour. And they come back and they knock again and they want a whisk. They come back and they knock again and they want a bowl. They come again, they knock, and they want a pan, and so on. You get the idea that you're their kitchen, you're their grocery store. Anyway, so she comes and she knocks again, and this time, right? It's the real knock, and so you can't ignore that one. So you go to the door, and there she is, and she's frantic, and she's found out that her son. Her 10-year-old son has come down with a terminal condition. And up until this point, it has been 100% fatal. Nobody has ever been able to figure out anything in order to treat it, to let somebody live. Except she's been doing her research, and she's found that off in Ukraine, right, there's a special center that has been studying this, and they've figured out a treatment. It's a 50% success rate, but when they do so, somebody's cured. So there's a 50% chance that her boy can live and not die. But since it's Ukraine, they take cash up front, and it's only $10 million. So she wants, what does she want? $10 million. That's right. She wants $10 million. So she's coming to ask you for $10 million. How many of you are going to give her $10 million? You are all so cruel. You're not going to give her the $10 million? She needs the $10 million. You're not going to give it to her? And what if you tell her, well, I can't. I don't have it, right? But here, I'll give you what I have. So maybe, let's say you've got $1,000 that you can actually give her. You give her $1,000. And later she comes back. And she wants the rest of the $9,999,000, right? And later she comes back and she wants the rest. And later she comes back and she wants the rest. And later she comes back and she wants the rest. How do you feel? Right? So you're aggravated, right? What do? You close the door, you don't answer, you close the blinds, you hide the car in the garage, you don't let her know that you're home, you put a fence around the yard with a big dog inside of it. I don't know. Some people are really nice. They just say, oh, I'm going to move. Okay. Well, you're frustrated. Why? Because you don't have what they need. You can't supply it even though it's a legitimate need. But guess what? How does she feel? Same way. She feels frustrated. Why? Because she's not getting what she needs. And she thinks you've got it. Right? It's the same thing in relationships. It's the same thing in relationships. We go to somebody else thinking that they have what we need, that they're the source of what we need, and so we go to them to get that love that we need, but guess what? They need it too. And since they need it too, they need it as well. They can't be the source of it, but they think they should be. And so you have a husband and you have a wife or whatever, and so you go to her in order to get love, but do you get the love you need? What kind of love do you need? Do you need a love that's partial or a love that's full? Full, right. Do you need a love that is temporary or a love that's eternal? Eternal, right? Do you need a love that is poisoned or a love that's pure? Right? No, so you need a love that is pure, you need a love that is full, you need a love that is eternal, and no human being can give you that. So when you go to them for that love that you need, and you don't get it, you end up empty, partially at least, right? And they end up frustrated because they can't supply your need, but they think they can't, they should. And so you end up with frustration on both sides of the issue. Why? Because you're barking up the wrong tree. Right? You're barking up the wrong tree. Whose responsibility is it for me to be filled with oxygen? It's mine. Right? I got to breathe. Right? Whose responsibility is it for me to be filled with water? It's mine. I got to drink. And whose responsibility is it for me to be filled with proper nutrients? It's mine. I got to eat. Have you ever felt empty when it comes to love? Yeah. Even partially. Yeah. All of us have. So whose responsibility is it for me to be filled with love? Is it God's? Or is it mine? It's mine. Right? It's mine. Because if it was God's, he does how many things well? All things well. Right? He does all things well, and he does all things well how often? All the time. So if it was his responsibility, we would be always full, completely full all the time. We would never have a time where we weren't. So it's not his responsibility to fill us. But he does have a responsibility. Imagine that you've been fasting for a few days. And you're going to break the fast, and you're going to go to this healthy buffet restaurant. And it's got like a couple hundred dishes that are there. You've got salads, and you've got hors d'oeuvres, and you've got entrees, and you've got desserts and all of it. And it's all healthy. It's all plant-based. It's all good for you. It's all tasty and so on. And you have not eaten for 3 days. And you go in there and you get your bowl and plate and fork and spoon and knife and tray and so on and so forth. And you go, you're not going to eat all 200 dishes, so you're going to go survey the land a little bit and find out which ones you are going to get and so on. So you do, and you're drooling, and oh, it's so nice and whatever. And you go around and you do something unusual. You leave your plate and bowl and fork and knife and spoon and tray and everything there, and you go walk outside without taking anything. And you're still hungry. And then you get this very American thought. I'm going to sue that restaurant because I'm still hungry. Is that going to work? Well, until a few years ago, I would say no. Now I don't know what the court systems would do. But should it work? No, it shouldn't work, because it's not the restaurant's responsibility to feed you. It's their responsibility to make it available and to meet certain standards, right? And as long as it meets certain standards and they make it available, it's your responsibility to take the food and eat it. And if you go away from the buffet hungry, whose responsibility is that? It's yours, right? So God has a buffet, right? And that buffet is called love. God has a buffet of love, and that love involves all sorts of different things like grace and mercy, security, acceptance, belonging, justice, truth, freedom, so on and so forth. That's just a small list, right? There's all sorts of dishes that are there that are different components of love. And that buffet is available to how many people? Everyone, everybody. That's right. And it is open how often? All the time. That's right. And how much does it cost to eat at that restaurant? It is absolutely expensive. It is. It's absolutely expensive. But he paid the price. Right? So for us, it's free. Right? He said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. It's always open. He said, I have loved you with an everlasting love. It's always full. It's never empty. Right? And he said, everyone who thirsts, come to the waters. You who have no money, come and buy and eat. Yes, come and buy wine and milk without money and without price. Right? He's made it free. Not that it's free in and of itself, but he's made it free. So we can come to the buffet and we can eat as much as we want until we're full. If we stop before we're full and we still remain hungry, is it his responsibility or ours? It's ours. That's right. So if you've ever gone empty, which we all have, it's not his responsibility. It's not others' responsibility. It's ours. It's our own. But his buffet is not the only buffet. There's other buffets out there. Other people out there, right? And just like us, they're selfish. And along with that comes things like betrayal, abuse, deceit, and control, but it comes with some enticing things like power, pleasure, popularity, and possessions, and so on. So there's some enticing, nice things in there, but there's some other stuff behind it that's not so nice. And we have a natural tendency to eat off of this buffet. That's our natural tendency. This is what we gravitate towards. And so we naturally will eat off of somebody else's buffet. And you've heard the phrase, you are what you eat, right? You are what you eat. Well, have you ever found it interesting that when you're around a close loved one and they get frustrated, what happens? You get frustrated, right? You are what you eat, right? The apple, you eat it, it eventually becomes a part of you. Well, when it comes to this buffet, it happens right away. They get frustrated, you get frustrated, right? They get depressed, you start getting depressed, right? Why? Because you're eating off their buffet. And that which you eat, you become like, right? That which you eat, you become like. We have a choice. We do have a choice. It's just most of us have not realized that we had the choice. Maybe intellectually we did, but really in the experience of day-to-day life, we just haven't understood it. And so I don't want anybody to, go beat yourself up and going, I can't believe I haven't been doing this my whole life. Okay, well, that's fine. Today's today, right? The opportunity now, right? We have a choice. We can choose which buffet that we eat from. And that buffet that we choose to eat from will determine our outcomes. You want to feel secure? You want to be secure? Well, that comes from God, right? You want to be manipulated and controlled? Well, that comes from others, right? You want deceit and abuse and betrayal? Well, eat off of that buffet, you'll get it. And guess what? When you get it, you become it, right? You start dishing it out in the same way. Right? And so it behooves us, it is our opportunity, what should I say? By God's grace, He has given us a choice that we might choose to take from His buffet and not from others. Guess what happens when you choose His buffet and not the buffet of others? That's right, you're fulfilled. And you have the love that you need. And guess what they can't do to you? They can't control you. They can't manipulate you. Why? Because the only control that they have or the only manipulation that they can do is if you take what they say. If you believe it and make it your own, right? It's the only way. You know that old phrase, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. There's the other variety, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will crush my soul. Well, which one is true? Well, depends on which one you take. If you take the words and make them your own, yeah, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will crush my soul. Because people will say some nasty stuff, and then you believe it, and it crushes you. Why? Because you believed it. Was it true? No, it wasn't true. It was a lie. We're believing lies. But when we don't take it, when we don't make it our own, then sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Why? Because they won't hurt me if I don't take it. Do we have an example of somebody not taking it? Only taking from God's buffet and not taking from others? That's right. Jesus. Right? He said in John 2:24 and 25, it says, but Jesus would not entrust himself to them, for he knew all people. He did not need any testimony about mankind, for he knew what was in each person. Right? Jesus did not eat from their buffet. How many times did he eat from their buffet? Never. Right? He did not eat from their buffet, so they could never control or manipulate him. No matter what applause there might have been or whatever censure might have come, he never responded to it. He never got caught up in it because he never took it. What did he take from? He took from his Father. And what did his Father say about him? When he was baptized, John Baptist baptized him, what? Right, that's right. This is my Son whom I love, and I am well pleased. Right? With him I am well pleased. So that's what his Father told him. I am well pleased with you. I love you. So Jesus had that in his mind, and he always carried it with him. So no matter what somebody else said, no matter what somebody else did, no matter how they responded, he didn't take from them. He took from his Father. He is the well-beloved of the Father. So whether it was applause or whether it was censure, he didn't take it. That's the freedom that comes from taking from God's buffet and ceasing to take from others. Right? It's powerful. It's powerful. It frees us from so much. Nobody else has to change, and your entire life can change. Because the change is not about changing them. It's about changing you and where you take from. Right? Although there may be a tainted, corrupted atmosphere around us, we need not breathe its miasma, but may live in the pure air of heaven. We may close every door to impure imaginings and unholy thoughts by lifting the soul into the presence of God through sincere prayer. So prayer has a lot to do with it. Those whose hearts are open to receive the support and blessing of God will walk in a holier atmosphere than that of heaven and will have constant communion with heaven. Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. Now, we don't have time for presents, so we'll have to get that to that tomorrow. Thursday. We won't be here tomorrow. It'll be Thursday. Thursday, same time, same place. And for the screening out there, I think we're going to be on the exercise booth and doing fitness testing. And we're going to be doing air, so we do peak flows and so on and so forth, and filling out some more of your packets. So I'm going to, let's see. So if you have this Ways to Wellness booklet, bring it back with you when you come back. Because when you go through the different stations, we're going to fill out more information as we get around to the different stations. And then, of course, if you haven't been chosen for a consultation yet, then make sure you bring back your number, because if you're not here, then you're not going to get it. And those are at 4 o'clock Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday before the meetings with myself, or we have the Uchee Pines medical staff as well that is doing consultations Sunday mornings from 9 to 1. For individuals that are interested. And so we're seeking to try to get through as many people as we can and see as many people as we can and deal with all the things that we can or we need to. And again, if you got friends or family that you think would benefit by being here, we're starting to dig a little deeper, right? We started with some good foundational stuff yesterday. We're kind of digging a little bit deeper today. We are going to hit the rabbit's hole Thursday. Right? We're going to hit the rabbit hole Thursday, and we are going to go deep. Right? But we have to. We got to go there because we got to understand ourselves. We got to understand why we function. We got to understand how we function. We got to understand what the dysfunctions are so that we can cooperate intelligently with God in restoration, right? In restoration, and so we're going to hit the rabbit's hole tomorrow, quite a bit. So Thursday, keep saying tomorrow, Thursday, and then we will also be here Saturday night, same time, right? Saturday night they're not doing the health screening. It'll be 6 o'clock here, not 5:30. It'll be 6 o'clock here. On Saturday night, but Thursday it'll be 5:30, health screening and so on. And then Sunday we've got the healthy cooking class. That'll be from 2 o'clock to 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And So we will be doing not just demonstrations, but we'll be doing some, testing, tasting, I guess that's what you call it, partaking of some of the things that are being demonstrated. It won't be a full meal, but it'll be samples that we'll have. And we're going to be covering breakfast foods, and we're going to be covering some main dishes, and we're going to be covering some desserts, and maybe a good smoothie or something like that as well. So we have a good variety of things that you can kind of have in your repertoire that we'll be covering there on Sunday afternoon. So plan on that. And again, if you have any friends or family that you think would benefit from it, invite them, bring them out, and let's get deeper together, because we've been superficial too long, right? We got to get to the core. We got to get to the source. Questions. And again, questions do not have to be related just to what we covered now. It can be anything. You want to talk about, again, you want to talk about diabetes, you want to talk about heart disease, you want to talk about relationships, you want to talk about space travel, you want to talk about agriculture, or you want to talk about, I don't know, whatever it is. But we got time for question and answer if you're interested. So is there anybody that has questions? All seem to be pretty clear. Yeah? Okay. Yes. Microphone. We're going to get a microphone to you. So that, Jean.
When you live in an assisted living area and the only food that you have is what they serve you, how can you go about eating a good diet when what they serve is not a good diet?
That's a good question.
I mean, I know that that's a crazy question to ask.
No. That's a good question. And from that question, we might be able to launch off into maybe a little bit broader one, which is when I'm in an unhealthy food environment, how do I choose, or how can I go about eating the best way possible within that context? Like you find yourself in McDonald's or something else like that. In your case, it'd be assisted living, and they're providing the whole, everything for you. Somebody that's going to McDonald's, at least you can pick and choose from amongst the menu, which is not good anyways. So from that standpoint, well, there are a few things. I would say that however it's prepared, if you choose the plants on the plate, that's going to be your best option, right? Whether it's prepared high fat or not high fat, or whatever, whether they're frying it or whether they're adding a lot of oils or other things like that along with it, if you choose the plants on the plate, then that's going to be your best option, right? If animals come along on the plate as well, then there is kind of a spectrum. The Bible talks about things that are definitely not good. There's unclean meats, like pork. Pork is an unclean meat. Oh boy, we were missionaries in Nicaragua, in a little jungle village. No electricity, no running water, and so on. And we were trying to teach them about basic sanitation. We were working on bringing latrines in and other things like that, but they didn't. A lot of times they didn't use latrines, and so sometimes you see the kids going along, and they got to go to the bathroom. They squat and they go right there in the middle of nowhere, and then most of them are naked, and it's just lovely because you know what the pig does? Comes right behind. I know it's disgusting, but it really was disgusting to watch it. And then I thought, no wonder those things are unclean, right? And then there's other things like seafood that does not have fins and scales. That's unclean, and other animals that don't have cloven hooves, and so on and so forth. So, those would be the definite avoid ones. And then you have the clean meats, those are ones that typically are vegetarians, right? So if an animal is a carnivore, it's unclean. If it eats other dead animals or other animals, then it's considered an unclean animal. So if it doesn't eat animals, it eats plants, but it chews its cud and it has a cloven hoof, then that's a clean one. The birds that don't eat other dead animals or other animals are the clean ones. And then fish, if it has scales or fins, then those are the clean ones. So, sorry, catfish is on the unclean side, doesn't have scales. Got fins, but it doesn't have scales. Eel, unclean. Oysters, unclean. Crabs, unclean. You know, you go down the list. You just look at it. Scales and fins. Then that's the clean fish. Nowadays, they're not so clean. There's a lot of environmental pollution and so on that's going on, and it's best to move away from those as well. But you got to pray, and you got to say, okay, Lord, I'm in this situation, and I need to do the best that I can with what I've got, right? And what they're providing. I'm not in control, but from what I've got here, I'm going to choose the best amongst it, right? I need a certain amount of nutrients to kind of go on. And maybe you could petition to say, can I get more of those green beans, and can I get more of that mashed potatoes, and can I get less of this part, And a lot of them might be able to accommodate to that. Now, it might not be fixed the way that you exactly want it to. So you can't choose everything. But maybe later we can go over there and do an educational session for the dietary staff, give some presentations about what healthy food is and what healthy food isn't, and maybe they might actually start changing some of the ways that they provide or the things that they provide there. I'm willing to do that. And then if you're in a restaurant environment, fast food, whatever, same principles. Choose plants, whatever is available. If you're at McDonald's, well, they usually have salads that are available. Although all of the toppings on the salad, not so good. I can't remember which salad it is. It's like the chicken Caesar salad something at McDonald's. It has, or maybe it was Burger King. It has more calories than the double Whopper. Yeah. Because all the fat that's in the dressing and then the chicken that goes on it and all that kind of stuff. So, the lettuce part of it is good. The animal part of it is not so good. And if you go to Wendy's, well, they got baked potatoes. Taco Bell's got bean burritos, bean tacos, and that kind of stuff. And their beans are made without lard. And you've got like Chipotle, Qdoba, the other places make those big burritos. Oh, they got wonderful black beans and brown rice and lettuce and guacamole and all that kind of stuff that you can pile on there. If you go to Subway, you can get it without the meat and all the other inclusions along with it as well. You can go to, there's Fazoli's fast food Italian. It's got you can get the whole grain pasta, and it's got marinara sauce marinara to go along with it, and so on. And there's a lot of options that you can look at. Now, it's higher fat, higher salt than you would normally make at home. So don't make it a habit to eat out, unless you have to. And if you are eating out and you have to, brown bag it sometimes, right? That'll kind of help out. Other questions? Yes. I got the microphone to you. We're going to get the microphone to you. All right.
With the things that are going on today, you see all the things that are just getting increasingly worse. Families killing their own children, and just all the people that are just out of no place. Just like the other day, somebody on the bus got up and started shooting everybody, and it's getting so bad. It just seems like a lot of people have lost their faith. What do you think, would be the answer to try to get them back to the Lord? Because it seems like they've just lost their faith in the Lord.
Well, there's a couple of things to that. One, I think one of the problems is that many ways, Christians have lost their peculiarity. People have a need. They have a need for love. They have a need for meaning. They have a need for purpose. They have a need for family, for society, and so on and so forth. And Christianity, really, at its roots, at its basis, seeks to fulfill all those needs, and it really does so really well. But much of the Christian church has, I think, come up with this weird idea that the closer we become like the world, the more we'll attract the world. And so we adopt things just like the world so that we might attract the world, but then we lose the peculiarity. We lose the real nature of what is the drawing factor. Why is it that martyrs died? They were willing to be burned to death, or to be stretched and pulled apart to pieces and all of that kind of. Why were they willing to face those things? Because there is such substance, there is such reality, there is such a fulfillment of our basic needs and our purpose of life that Christianity offers. But when we water it down, when we compromise and so on and so forth, then we lose that peculiarity, and then there's, what is there to draw? What's there to draw? And so part of it is because we've shifted, right? We've compromised, and so on, and so there's not so much to draw back. God protects a population for his children that are in it, right? We see that. Paul, he was shipwrecked, but all 250 some people that were on board were saved. Why were they saved? Because Paul was there and because he prayed for their salvation. And so all of them were preserved because Paul was there, right? And there was preservation. We see it even in the Bible history that God preserves nations. He preserves societies. He preserves because his children are there and they're continuing to represent him in the locations that they're at. But when that starts not being the case, well, there's an enemy. And he gets more and more access. Why? Because we give him more and more permission. And then he can work more and more freely. And then we start seeing chaos that's happening. Yeah, people shooting each other and killing their parents and doing all that kind of stuff, walking into churches and shooting people and so on. And then we're all afraid and walking around and all that kind of stuff. I'm not afraid. Why? Because I know in whom I trust. And I know that I can trust him. And I know that even if something bad happens, it will work out for good, because he's promised that all things work out for good to those who love them, to those who are called according to his purpose. And so if I'm out and I get mugged, well, I know that if it happens, if the Lord permits it and an angel doesn't come and intervene and all that kind of stuff, then God's got a purpose for good to work out through it, and I've got some lessons to learn, right? Okay, okay, I put myself in his hand. I don't go around worried that somebody's going to shoot me or somebody's going to beat me up or do any of that kind of stuff, because I know in whom I trust. And so that's a hope. That's a courage that God can give to us, and so on and so forth. But not when we're compromising, not when we're half here, half there, and so on and so forth. I tell people, there's the fence. Somebody's on the fence. Well, guess who owns the fence? The devil. Right? The devil owns the fence. If you're on the fence, you're on his ground. That's right. You're only on the Lord's ground when you're firmly on the Lord's ground. And that's good. It's a good thing. So I don't know if I really answered your question or not, but that's my answer, and I'm sticking to it. Yeah. One more. All right. And then we'll close with a prayer.
One thing that I have noticed is there's two big issues, and one is some people get so involved with all these distractions today, all these new inventions and cell phones and computers. That isn't too good. But another thing is they have a big lot of faith in their friends, or their whatever's going on in society, in the games, and this is a distraction from the Lord.
A distraction for sure, but the Lord never distracts. The enemy does, right? And so distractions come from the enemy, not from the Lord. The Lord is seeking to get our focus, get our attention, right? Draw us back to a focus that does so many things beyond what we think it would do, right? Save us from our current disappointments. Get us to the place where we're not controlled and manipulated by others. Have us in a place where we have a constancy and a peace and a trust and courage that can't be disturbed. To have it's far beyond, it's what we need, but people are even afraid to look for it because they don't think they'll find it, right? But it's there. Thank you for those questions. I'm going to pray. Those of you whose numbers were picked, make sure you see Nessie in the back to go ahead and schedule your consultation times. I think the table, the resource table, like the herbal stuff and books and whatever is still open, I think. So you can go check that out on your way out. And then again, Thursday night, 5:30, same place. And we're going to hit the rabbit hole. We're going to go deep on Thursday. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for your abundant blessings. We thank you that you love us so much. And Lord, thank you that you have provided a love that is full, that it's always available and it's free. And we can come to that buffet and we can eat anytime we want to. And Lord, thank you that we know it now. And may we begin to choose to do so, and to do so until we're full. And then we've got good stuff to give. And so, Lord, this we pray. We thank you for it. And, Lord, bring about your health and healing in our lives the way that you intended for it to be. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.